It's the Glenn Miller song, and it's also the nose art. It's built kind of late 44-ish. Never saw combat, was used as a training airplane. For a while after the war, it was a forest fire airplane. Developed in response to a requirement for a medium bomber, medium bombers being mostly two-engine bombers. And it was built by North American Aviation. That one was built in Kansas City, Kansas, kind of in the middle of the U.S. And it served very well in the capacity it was designed for. You'll notice it has a little bit of that inverted gull wing structure, which is kind of unique for a bomber. But they did that to avoid some aerodynamic issues that happened to solve it. So that's why they went with that. Probably the most famous application was the Doolittle Raid in April of '42, when 16 airplanes bombed Japan and went on to China. All of them crashed in one fashion or another. Crews either bailed out or rode the airplane down. The ones that crashed in the water right off the Chinese coast were the ones that had the most casualties. But even then, 75 out of the 80 guys that flew the mission survived, so it wasn't a suicide mission by any stretch. They're probably more than you think. It's a very reliable, easy to fly, and pretty easy to take care of for a two-engine airplane. So that's why they last. I mean, this one's been around since '44. So, medium bombers aren't quite the way as the big bombers like the B-17 or the Lancaster or whatever are. Typically, you might have a pilot, co-pilot, navigator, flight engineer, and maybe a gunner or two in the back. So that might take you to, 7? But there were versions of it that didn't have a co-pilot seat. It was a single pilot. So you could get that down to five guys. So it wasn't like you had 10 like on a B-17 or a B-24. They had a gun turret on top, typically, especially in the late models, but not all models had it. You had side guns and a tail gunner. We talked a little bit about the Doolittle mission, in which it served perfectly well, even though they had to fly farther than they thought they were going to have to fly by a great stretch, hundreds of miles. As an operational aircraft, combat aircraft, its use diminished quite rapidly. But because it was stable, easy to fly, could haul people around, it was used as a auxiliary hauling kind of airplane for quite a while. And it had some training functions. Let me back up and say there was one or two models of the B-25 that were specifically built as low-level strafers and bombers. They were built not to drop bombs at medium altitude. They were trained to go down low, 100 feet maybe above the ground and strike.
That's low.
That's very low. You don't have very many fighters chasing you when you're doing it at 100 feet or 200 feet. And that was their normal mode of operation. Approach at a higher level, but when you get near the target, you go down low. Particularly in the South Pacific, there was one group called the 345th Bomb Group that flew specifically configured B-25s, and they would skip bombs into sides of Japanese ships. They would drop them at between 100 and 200 feet, bounce them off the water, and skip them. And if they just missed but went underneath and went off, that was okay because it would break the spine of the ship going off underneath. So they were built for doing that low-level work. B-25s didn't normally get into a shooting fight with Japanese airplanes. They could on occasion, but their tactics were, especially the low-level guys, go in low where you're not going to be detected, seen. You don't want to bother the hornet's nest, stir them up. That wasn't a big deal. They could have hauled the amount of ammo and bombs and things that they had to deal with. Some of the models had a cannon in them, a 75 millimeter tank gun firing forward. And the breech was behind the pilots and kind of where the navigator sat. So you could get maybe 2 or 3 shots off on a pass. But at the recoil was really something, and the whole airplane would feel like it's slowing down. And they eventually decided they'd rather put more machine guns. Some of them had 18 machine guns in them, the 10 in the front, that kind of thing. They'd have 4 or 5 out through the plexiglass, and then 2 in pods on each side of the crew compartment, sides of the airplane. And then you had the 2 in the forward turret that could fire. It had a pretty heavy load it could carry, ammos and bombs, and they did fine. You could bring a lot of firepower to bear on a strafing pass, and that's why they were called the strafers. They were really effective at what they did. All I'd tell you is they were all young men. Your standard pilot, whether he be a fighter pilot, a B-25 pilot, or a B-24 pilot, was somewhere between 21 and 23. Your standard gunner on a bomber aircraft was 17 to 20. So these are young people we're talking about. In American terms, the gunners were like high school graduate kids, and the pilots were like your typical college senior, university senior, 4th year senior, that kind of thing. So they were all young. They used to do a parafrag bombing. They would take bombs, relatively small bombs, that were fragmentation bombs. They were designed to blow up and have metal ball bearings flying all over. And they would put a little parachute on the back end of them, and they'd go over a Japanese airfield at about 100 feet and drop these things. You could see them coming out of the airplane. And the purpose of the little parachute was to retard them just enough so that the airplane was out of the way by the time the bomb went off. If you dropped from 100 feet, you could still be in the kill zone when the bomb went off. So there are movies where you can see these little white parachutes coming out and going down the ramp of Japanese airfields.
That must have been scary.
Yeah, kind of. But again, they're kids.
Yeah,
They like exciting things. They think they're doing an important mission. They're not stupid though. They wouldn't do things that are uselessly reckless. But it was a dangerous business. Flying and training is a dangerous business. The kind of roles it did in attacking Japanese airfields and things were now taken over by other kinds of airplanes. Fighters, fighter bombers, like the Sky Raider that we'll talk about. Sky Raiders could do the mission that B-25s did. It served in all theaters. While it made its name in the Pacific, it was very effective in North Africa. They were stationed in Italy, and even after D-Day, there were a couple of squadrons in the UK of B-25s.